All right. First and foremost, I want to give our praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bashim Yahushua, Bashim Kakwadash. Second, I want to give double honor to the apostles of Jesus, the rule of flow, and a peace, blessing, salutation to the whole for elect. Lord's will you be edified. This is Shukwa Karal from GMS, Virginia, coming back at you again. Now, you may be disturbed, but it is what it is. We understand it's going to be a recompense for a lot of our women. Well, they're not our women. They're our enemies. So you got to understand, this is part of the battle. We're at war, and this is why you have to have a vigilant mindset. You got to know the terrain that you're on. A lot of the so-called black women has been put against us. Latina, Hispanic, Native American women has been put against their men, and especially other Israelite men. The whole nation is messed up. So beware. You might get offended, but it is what it is. This is from Average Man Unplugged. Fair use. Not using this video for any money purpose or etc. whatever. But it says black women asking the so-called white man for help to get rid of black men. So hey, embrace yourself.
Men at all, then we should talk about men at all. Then we should talk about.
We don't want to deal with black men at all.
I love all men and not black men. Just not black men.
Well, is there any women here who don't want to deal with men, period, or is it just black men, or is it a mixture?
It's just black men, and we actually want non-black men's help in these corrections that you speak of.
So what are the corrections that you're looking for specifically?
Force, because that's the only thing that's gonna work.
But I mean, what are you looking for black men to arrive at? A place of understanding of like, what do you want to see?
Well, we believe that there is no hope for them. That we don't believe in changing their minds. We don't. But I'm trying not to say what I really want to say because you're on stage. But if they could not exist, hey, we wouldn't be mad at them.
So there you have it. The nigga woman.
Men at all, then we should talk about.
We don't want to deal with black men at all.
I love all men and not black men. Just not black.
Get the hell out of there. So hold on. So come on. Why would it do that? Damn. Let me put it back up. Hold on. All right, so I'm gonna use this one. I had the other one, but if you don't use it in a certain matter of time, I guess it disappears. But ChatGPT right here. How did women in ancient times become spoils of war? Because you got to remember, like the scripture says, we were going to go into captivity. We were going to be conquered. Our woman was going to pretty much Deuteronomy 28:54-56, the tender, delicate woman that should sojourn amongst you. Her eye should be evil toward her husband. So damn, yeah. Maybe this one, it might be a little bit better. But our woman has been psychologically, mentally, physically put against us. The works of slavery, this system, the conditioning of aid that Esau gave to our women, gave to these black women and Latina, Hispanic women, Native American women, and turned our women against us, and due to a lot of falling of our men, and it's going to state because as us men of Israel, the children of Israel, we've been conquered. And you can deny it, you can be in denial, you can say, oh man, it didn't happen to us, and nothing happened, we free. You can go ahead and say that all you want to, but the reality of it is the so-called black women do not like your ass. And a lot of so-called Latina, Hispanic, Native American women don't like your ass neither. And also a lot of West Indian women. My growing up, being around a lot of West Indians, Jamaicans, Caribbean, Trinidadian, they're not too fond of so-called black men here in America neither. But it says, how did women in ancient times become spoils of war? And we're in a war now. So, if you don't believe it, you can go read the book, the Willie Lynch letter, Making of a Slave. And it'll also go in. I was trying to find a little pamphlet of that page, which tells you how to break the nigger female. And it goes into how the so-called black woman was going to become broken. And it says that's a difficult but important historical question. In many ancient societies, women became spoils of war as part of the broader system of conquest. And we understand how America was set up, rape, rob, and murder. And the so-called white man dominated the men, so-called Latinos, Hispanics, Native Americans, and destroyed the men and took the women. It is what it is. If you get offended, hey, you're not in reality. This is what really happened. And then eventually they brought the so-called blacks here from the west coast of Africa, which were, Benjamin, Levi, and Judah, and brought them over here and, set up a system to enslave them and then eventually keep them underneath control. And, they broke us as a nation. And, we understand what happened to what the so-called white man did to our women. So it says the conquest of enslavement and patriarchy, and the so-called white man, the white male, he's a patriarch. He's the Lord. He's the king. He's the ruler right now. Like the scripture says, Job 9:24, the earth has been given to the hands of the wicked. So it says this practice was not unique to one civilization. It appeared in different forms across Mesopotamia, Greece, Rome, ancient Israel, parts of Africa, Asia, and the Americas. There you go. Here's how and why it happened. It also tells you what in Daniel 2, 7, Revelation 18, Isaiah 47, Jeremiah 50 and 51. It pretty much tell you how, long story short, it tells you how America was going to come into power. So it says war as property acquisition, right? So in ancient warfare, and you got to remember, we are yet captive this day. We can read Baruch, Lamentations, etc. And if the Lord is dealing with you, you'll understand. We've been conquered as a nation. And this is why these things and, these harsh realities is happening to us. So it says, victors often viewed everything belonging to the defeated. We were conquered. So the so-called white man did what? He came in the name as a Christian, right? And then he took us as his possession, and he said, yo, we're going to enforce them and enslave them, and we're going to put religion on them to control them so the slaves won't rebel. It's a lot, that's their form of brand. Christianity was a brand that Esau put on our people to pretty much mentally destroy them. So, I'm going to read it again. So, in ancient warfare, victors often viewed everything belonging to the defeated. And remember, how Esau, with his newspeak, he changes the words around. We're still to this day underneath the so-called white man. Land, livestock, treasures, and people as property to be divided among the conquerors. You go back to slavery days, the so-called white man had his way with the so-called black woman, the so-called Latina woman, Hispanic, Native American woman. So women and children, and it's not a coincidence why the so-called black woman, like the scripture says, a woman shall get above the man, so surpass a man, so join a pass, slaki, compass a man, and that was a deliberate plot to destroy us as a nation, give our women aid, etc., and give them power to be basically the leaders of our nation, which was complete ass backwards. So women and children were considered part of the defeated community's possession. I just pulled it up, so I don't know what it's going to say, but I'm just going to read through it and decipher it. So it says, considered part of the defeated community's possessions. So captured men were often put unalived or enslaved for labor, and that's what the so-called black men have become. We're entertainers, etc. We're not a threat, and we've been pretty much put against each other as a nation, and Esau has done this, so we can pretty much stay, undivided and controllable. So while women were taken as domestic slaves, concubines, or wives. So, two, patriarchal and economic systems. And, one thing, a lot of, this new feminism, sexual liberation, a new wave of feminism, what they have done is they took the plot of what the so-called white man has done to us as a nation, and then basically distilled that bitterness on the so-called black man. So, you had this whole notion of so-called black men beating the hell out of, color purple, etc. And, basically the so-called white man used the anger and the injustice and the oppression that the so-called black man was going through. And he pretty much plotted it on TV, showing that so-called black men, all he was doing was beating up and, pretty much like a whoremonger, a pimp, etc. That was, thanks to black exploitation, the black exploitation era. So most ancient societies were deeply patriarchal, meaning men held legal and social authority. And it says women were typically under the control of a male guardian, father, husband, or master. This framework made it easier for conquerors to rationalize taking women, as they were seen as transferring ownership from one man to another. Legal and religious sanction. So some ancient legal codes and texts explicitly allowed the taking of women in war. And you can read Deuteronomy 21:10-14. Greek Roman customs allow soldiers to take female captives as slaves or concubines. Assyrian and Hittite records show women listed among the spoils distributed after campaigns. Such rules often aim to regulate the practice rather than prohibit it. For symbolic power and humiliation, taking women from a conquered people also symbolize domination and humiliation of the enemy. And this is what the so-called white man did to the so-called black man. He took our woman and put her against us. So not only did he separate us and took her from us, he reprogrammed her mind to go against us. And this is why you have the so-called black woman in modern day do her all she can to destroy the mind of the so-called black man, instead of being his pillar of rest and his helpmeet. She's an enemy. And also he puts his children against them. But Esau had to somewhat make it possible that niggas can still cohabitate with each other, just enough to breed and create more slaves. So he allowed niggas to get a little cute, whatever, and he allowed women to shake her little ass, twerk, and become sexual. But overall, our people don't come together, because that's not a proper marriage. A man is being overly sexual and lustful, and a woman just being a whore, that doesn't breathe forth any structural order. So both the man is fucked up, the woman is fucked up, and then the child is just prey for the so-called white man. So it says, again, Salaki, we keep rubbing this thing up and down, rolling this thing up and down. So grape and abduction in war were acts meant to destroy a defeated group's honor and lineage. Damn. And that's what happened a lot of times. 5, forced assimilation and population control. Damn. In some cases, female captives were integrated into the conqueror's society. They see that? Hey, that's what Esau did to the so-called black woman. He allowed her to sojourn amongst this society. Yeah, forced to bear children, helping expand the victor's lineage or tribe. Let me see. This practice blurred the line between enslavement and forced marriage. Let me see. Read that again. In some cases, female captives were integrated into the... Yeah. Forced to bear children. Yep. Helping expand the victor's lineage or tribe. Yep. So the so-called black woman was able to, sojourn with the Edomite, with the so-called white man. You were tolerated. You was given gifts. You was brought front row while the so-called black man was humiliated, ridiculed, broken down, chased, broken, shot down, strategically broken, mentally, physically, spiritually, in all aspects. While the so-called black woman was basically given a hall pass for the moment, and you get a hall pass. That don't give you the right to roam the hall. It just give you a pass to transfer to where you got to go, and then you go back. But the so-called white man, lied to the so-called black woman, and the so-called black woman really believed that she's a part of this society. And now that the so-called white man is taking back what he gave to you, now the so-called black woman is looking crazy as hell. But the so-called white man is about to show you his true self, in the times to come. So decline in modern condemnation. Over centuries, moral and legal systems evolved. Yep. Even though they try to make it seem like they're involved, it's still going on. It's still going on. Ain't nothing changed. Yeah, so, here it is. So over century, moral and legal systems evolved. And, that's that bullshit, that Esau tried to paint a good picture, Christianity and, the equality, rights, and liberal. Esau always tried to play, as if he cared for the people, humanitarian rights, the rights of the people, all people are created. And that was all bullshit to justify what he did, but then come back at you and package it in a different form of a war, and then keep doing it, So it says, began medieval Christian Islamic laws of war began placing restrictions on enslaving or violating captives, and that's all bullshit, So modern international law, the humanitarian rights, like the Geneva Conventions, explicitly forbid sexual violence and enslavement in war, and that's all bullshit, man. But it's yet echoes of this ancient practice persisted well into early modern times, and even today. Yeah, some armed conflicts tragically reproduce similar patterns of gender-based violence, and nothing has changed. The so-called white man still does it today, and our woman has fell for it, and that's why the scripture says, "She that is my she that is my enemy," and I'm gonna wrap this thing up with that. "She that is my enemy shall be trodden down like mud in the street," and that's what's going to happen to a lot of our women. You have the elect women, you have the women that's going to, be saved, etc. But you're going to have a lot of our women, so-called black, Latina, Hispanic, Native American, West Indian woman, that's going to be put to death due to her running her mouth and siding with the enemy. But with that, Lord's will be edified. Shalom.